Saturn in the second house is going to say everything about your wealth, your independence, and your acceptance. So Saturn in the second indicates great thriftiness, or maybe it just means you're very, very stingy. Saturn in the second house represents excellent self-sufficiency, or maybe it means you've just been abandoned. Saturn in the second house indicates profound universality, or maybe you're just wandering around. How do you know the difference? Which one is it? Is it the positive stuff or is it the negative stuff? That depends entirely upon the positivity of Saturn in your chart. The more positive it is, the more it symbolizes the positive aspects. And the more negative it is, the more the negative aspects. So I will explain how to figure that out at the end of this video. And also, if you're not the mathematical type, I figure it out for you in the reports that I offer. So if you want, you can go to my website, victicara.com, and order one of my reports, and it will tell you exactly how positive or negative, and therefore how much stress to put on either the positive or the negative traits. So Saturn in the second house indicates great thriftiness. Yeah, you spend money wisely. You buy things that are actually useful. You take your time to make sure you're actually getting the value that you should be getting. But on the other hand, this same trait could just be described as stinginess. And it would feel more like stinginess the more Saturn is negative in the chart. So what's the difference between stinginess and thriftiness? Well, thriftiness is wise spending. Stinginess is reluctance to spend. Stinginess really comes into you should have given money at this point. You should have paid. You should have spent. But because you're so attached to not spending money, you missed this opportunity or you kind of violated something that you should have done. So a positive Saturn in the second house indicates great wisdom in how you spend money. A negative Saturn in the second house indicates great foolishness in how you spend money in terms of not spending it correctly, failing to spend it. Another thing about Saturn in the second house is that it describes a person who's very, very self-sufficient. They're independent. They know how to take care of themselves and nourish themselves. But the negative permutation of this is kind of you are forced to be self-sufficient because nobody's taking care of you. So negative Saturn in the second house indicates lacking the support that typically comes from family and really close friends, and instead being ostracized or alienated from those support groups. A positive Saturn in the second house describes somebody with great universality. They have a universal relatability to them. They're able to relate with and interact with and work well with and get along well with many, many different types of people in many, many different kinds of situations. But the downside of this, again, is just Saturn in the second house means you're forced into this universality because you weren't really given a home. You don't really have a home base. That's why you're open to all kinds of exotic foreign ideas and so forth. So a negative Saturn in the second house indicates a person who is wandering. They don't really have roots that nourish them. So therefore they sort of wander around. If it's positive Saturn in the second house, then that's fine because they're diverse. And they have a universal relatability and they get their nourishment without needing a centralized root. But if it's negative Saturn in the second house, that's not okay. Not having a central root in their life gives them a lack of nourishment and causes them to just feel kind of aimless and homeless and like a wanderer or a vagabond. Now again, how do you know which of these extremes applies to you? It's dependent on you figuring out whether or not your Saturn is positive or negative. The more positive Saturn is, the more it's indicating and speaking about the positive traits of Saturn in the second. And the more negative it is, the more it's speaking about the negative traits. So as you see, the interpretation of any planet in any house really depends an awful lot on the positivity or negativity of that planet. So now let's go over how you would figure that out. First of all, the most basic consideration is the sign dignity. I've recently published 3 or 4 videos on this exact topic. Saturn in the first house in Aries is not the same as Saturn in the first house in Libra, and it would be ridiculous to think that it is. It's because Saturn in Aries is in fall and Saturn in Libra is exalted. And there's this whole spectrum of dignity in between exaltation and fall. And if you want to know that in detail, check those videos to figure out how you calculate dignity. In addition to the sign dignity that a planet has in a house, you also want to think about how the house itself is either advantageous or deleterious to the planet's dignity. If the planet is a malefic or the sun or the nodes, then it is at an advantage if it's in houses 3, 6, 10, or 11, but it's in a disadvantage if it's in 1, 4, 5, or 9. And if it's at an advantage, you just give a bonus to its dignity. I give 25%. And if it's at a disadvantage, you subtract some of its dignity. I subtract 25%. If it's one of the other planets, the benefics, along with the moon or Mercury, then the advantageous or bonus houses are 1, 4, 5, 9, and 10. And the disadvantageous houses are 3 and 6. Finally, the third step is to consider the lordship of this planet. If a planet is the lord of certain houses, then it gets a bonus to its dignity. If it's the lord of other houses, then it might get a detriment. So the best house to be the lord of is the first, because the lord of the first wants to protect the whole chart because the whole chart belongs to it. Also, it's very positive to be the lord of a trine, the 5th or the 9th. And it's also somewhat positive to be the lord of the 4th or the 10th. It's disadvantageous, however, to be the lord of the 6th, 8th, or 12th. There's a loophole about this. If the lord of the 6th, 8th, or 12th is occupying the 6th, 8th, or 12th, then it's not a disadvantageous thing. It's an advantageous thing. And what you would subtract, you instead add to the dignity. So if it's confusing, or you just want to see exactly how I do it, don't worry. You can do that. You can go to my website, victicara.com, click into the report section, and then you have an option to get either just the basic chart, or you can also get the subdivisions. So please consider doing that. And also, please, if you haven't subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, leave me a comment, let me know what you're thinking. Also, just you doing that helps YouTube spot this video and show it to other people. So I would really appreciate that. Thank you very much.